Welcome to Core Connect, where we bring industry experts together for core conversations on modern manufacturing. Manufacturers that strategically leverage their data are better equipped to adapt to today's environment. But most companies only analyze 12% of their data, and just a quarter say they have a data-driven approach. So how should manufacturers use data to be more responsive and proactive? In this episode, MCA Connect's Director of Microsoft Cloud Strategy, Melinda Carlson, talks with our resident data scientist, James Roberts, about the value of untapped data. Find out how to reduce costs, mitigate risks, increase visibility, and much more. Welcome to Core Connect.
James, you have been a tough guy to catch the last few months. It seems like data is just heating up in the manufacturing space. And as our resident data scientist, you are just busier than ever. So just take a few minutes and tell me what you're seeing in the enterprise data landscape and what's changed.
Oh yeah, I mean it's hot right now. Obviously, post COVID, there's a lot of interest in how do we become more adaptive and responsive to environments that can quickly change. Clearly, but it's great to be here with you and to see you again and take the time with you today and our viewers as well.
Absolutely. I think there's been a long time culture of knowing that we need reporting across our business. We need that Monday morning stand-up reporting, and there's kind of that historical rearview mirror view of data that's been so prevalent in the business world. And just curious, like what you're seeing in terms of like philosophical changes, especially in the manufacturing space.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have seen a philosophical shift. I think it's been going on for over a decade now, but our manufacturers are just catching up with this trend. And I mean, we're still seeing. I was at a client not a couple of months ago where we're looking at their different departments and how they spend their time, and about 60% of their time was spent capturing and exporting data from various source systems, whether that's siloed data and whatnot, where we have different sources of information, and they're having to go in and export that as a CSV file and then compile that together every single Monday morning. And we identified like 600 to 800 hours. That it's like,
Yeah.
You realize that you're going through this process every single week for something that could easily be automated and have more dynamic reporting that is available all throughout the week, not just on Monday afternoon, but where are we at right now? And it's an interesting mix from a philosophical change, right? Because instead of people compiling information and compiling reports and relying on macros from Excel and those sorts of things, by getting various data dumps, that what we're seeing is that they will then shift that up to their manager, and then their manager has to compile the reports from their subordinates and then create a management level report, and then it'll go up to a VP or something like that. And then the VP will ask a question like, why is this number so low? And what do you have to do? You have to go back down all of the different organizational hierarchy to determine what's causing these numbers to be off. And then it goes back up the chain again, rather than having a dynamic report that is, everyone has a dashboard that is at their specific level of granularity, but anyone can drill into any piece of information and see what some of the root causes are and start to get more insights rather than just simply historic reporting off that data, as you were mentioned, from a rear view mirror.
Yeah, absolutely. The non-value added steps that are involved here to get those business insights to make decisions. No wonder it takes some time. And it actually sounds very familiar to just the overall complexity that's developed in global organizations and manufacturers in particular, as they acquired new divisions, as they expand globally. That brings additional data sets as they add partners, as they add large customer accounts. It just adds additional data sources to their enterprise landscape. And it just naturally kind of evolved to be more complex and require more middle steps. And certainly, once you've done all of your hours and hours of, assimilating data and CSV exports, as you say, man, I bet then you've got to spend hours making sure it's correct, right? It's not off from the previous version and things like that.
Oh, that's for sure. Like there's certainly an opportunity for error, and what we try to do is eliminate that opportunity. Our mantra is BI is always right, and it's hard to say that business intelligence is always right if you have a lot of manual processes that are going into the process where there's no single source of truth, or where there's information that could easily be errantly entered or coded because of a stray hit on a keyboard where you didn't realize that your cursor was on that cell,
Right.
and the impact that could have on a report or something downstream of that.
Sure.
And then people have to say, it doesn't pass the sniff test. This report doesn't feel right. And then what ultimately ends up happening is they end up not trusting anything that's produced by that department
Right.
or that IT or business intelligence group, because there's a history of having errant data in there, even if it only happens at unopportune times and infrequently, that there's this kind of cloud that hangs over. We're not sure what to trust. And
No
that's
doubt. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, trust is at the core of any analytics strategy, and certainly systems can be more accurate than people. No one will dispute that. So I'm interested to hear your take. I've heard independent analyst firms say that most companies analyze only about 12% of their data, and maybe a quarter of them have say that they've achieved a data-driven culture. Just curious if anecdotally that's what you've seen, and any specifics around that dynamic today.
Yeah, the 12% is a little bit shocking, right? When I first hear it, my first thought is, well, surely that can't be right. And then you start to think, well, if they haven't analyzed 88% of their data, then that represents an untapped potential. And I think we have to put that in context a little bit, right? Which is to say, it may be that, yes, you have millions of transactions, and then you have one all up sales number that says, well, year to date, we've sold $1.5 billion. And yes, that isn't a single metric on top of millions of transactions. But does that mean that you've analyzed those million transactions? Probably not. And so to that extent, yes, they may have some reporting or some specific metrics that key off of transactional data, and specific data points that might be beyond that 12%. But what the metric is probably talking about here in that 12% is, are they truly analyzing that data? Are they finding the insights within that data? Because that transactional data is where all those insights happen, where we see patterns, where we see where we understand what's the root causes for changes within a business, and why those shifts might be happening, and making sure that we can interrelate those changes across reports. I mean, we go in and whenever you say, hey, anecdotally, are we seeing 88% of data untapped? Well, anecdotally, we go in and we see companies that have over 1,000 reports. Like, here's our reports. We have 1,000 reports. And then when you ask them, well, what are the most valuable of these reports? And then what do they have to lean on? The one that gets viewed the most times. And that's a sad answer to me, right? Because the most valuable reports should be those that pop out insights. And usually it's the reports that cut across those 1,000 reports, that I would say 10 reports that combine those 1,000 reports into meaningful insights and show patterns and trends across those 1,000 should be way more valuable than any one single report, because it happens to be what was my month-end sales number, and that we have the biggest sales team as the biggest department. So therefore, that's our most valuable report. Probably not.
Right.
It just happens to be getting the most views because of the nature of what's in it and what people care about.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just as you talk about all the transactional data that's just sitting out there, 88% of the whole estate that doesn't get analyzed. I mean, I think there's this talk of, it's no longer just transactional data. It's an asset to your organization.
Mm.
So tell me a little bit more about how data becomes an asset to your organization. What kind of untapped potential might be lying in that 88%?
Yeah, that 88% is rough, right? Which is that we have data across what I'll call the entire data footprint or the entire data ecosystem that's not getting analyzed or that's not getting the attention that it deserves. Because and it has inherently has value to the organization, especially when combined with other data. So when I say across your ecosystem, that includes all of your partners as well,
Hmm.
and any business partner relationship that you have. That yes, you might be doing an FTP site or that they're doing a nightly download to, and there's might be certain key data elements, but all of those transactions are in there, and that can represent a gold mine of material that we can then glean insights from. I was just talking to a customer last week where they have a third party system and they have an entire data warehouse in that third party system, and they've never pulled any data from it. They've gone
Interesting.
in and gone into the third party system and said, hey, I need the answer to this one question. And then they'll go look for a specific transaction. But that wasn't the reason they purchased that third party system and stood up that entire enterprise data warehouse for it. And it's not a part of their data landscape. They haven't centralized that with all of the other data
Right.
that they have to find value. That because what we're primarily looking at whenever we go into customers and you talk about data as an asset, it's data in and of itself has value, meaning that it can increase the valuation of a company just by having it. We've seen many instances of that if you have data that other companies don't have, either on customers or on an industry, and you can sell that back to them, then of course that has data or that has value. But then data combined with other data has a multiplicative value, because now you have data that you can glean insights from that very few others can, that can either impact your business or impact other businesses. That becomes valuable from a data as a service or data as an asset play.
Absolutely. This is actually kind of lighting up some reminders for me from our Connected Blueprint episode. One of the things we run into all the time with our strategy consulting and kind of looking at operational processes across global divisions is siloed procurement. That's something we see a lot of. And you may find that multiple divisions are procuring the same type of part from the same manufacturer, supplier rather, and you're missing out on volume negotiations. You're missing out on the big picture of that supplier's performance, and that's all data sitting under there. So I
Oh,
think,
for sure.
yeah, it's a great
For sure. I
connection.
mean, even and the suppliers have that data, right? Which there are times where even if we go, so you make a great point that you could have multiple suppliers that you're sourcing the same part from. And part of that may be the volume that one supplier can't handle that. Part of that may be that geographically to get these parts to these locations, it's better from a logistics play. Part of it might be from a lead time, that we have some kind of rush orders where we have to use different suppliers because they have different lead times than other suppliers. But yet, what we found, especially in this post-COVID era, is that contextual factors can change, but yet our procurement and sourcing processes stay the same because they're inflexible in that way, in that we don't have all of that data from our third parties and from our suppliers. And because we've only relied on, we pass them a purchase order and then they
Right.
pass us back an expected delivery date and those kinds of things. And they have to meet certain SLAs and all this. But that's the way that we've been doing business. And
Mhm.
instead, if we had this data proactively, then we could start to shift and understand that there's opportunities for savings by moving more of our workload to this one supplier. Than even, you mentioned all those contracts, that's all data. And that can be that we hit certain thresholds and now we need to act differently on that. But even if one of our suppliers has a lead time change, and we've started to see them slipping on that, well, we may have only been using them because even though they're higher cost, but because their lead times were better. But now that their lead times have slipped to be more in line with some of our other suppliers, it may be better to shift some of that demand to our other suppliers where costs are lower and the lead times start to match up. But if we don't have, a systematic way of looking at those types of prescriptive decision making, then how are we making those decisions? How are we adapting to that new environment?
Absolutely. I mean, it's really just looking at the big picture of our relationship with a given supplier and taking it beyond submitting orders to potentially even more proactive planning with that supplier so that they know across our divisions what we have in mind, what kind of demand we're seeing, and how that may translate to what we need from them in terms of capacity and lead times and whatnot. So I think this actually connects really nicely back to our previous episode of Core Connect, where I sat down with Doug Vulla, and he was talking about how supply chain constraints and limited on-hand inventory have accelerated manufacturers' transitions from what was historically a standard practice of make to stock, make a whole bunch of the same parts and stock it and wait for the demand to come. And now it's more about make to order, making the orders that you can make with the on-hand inventory that you have, making the orders that there's demand for. And I'm curious to get your take on how we can help manufacturers with a challenge like that one and the critical role that the data plays.
Yeah, I mean, data is going to be key in this, and Doug knows that environment better than anybody, right? He's been living that for decades now, and he's a master in that area, and he's seen the shifts over time to these sorts of things, and so it's always great to pick his brain. But data is going to play a key role in that as we prepare for that type of a shift. Obviously, we have production environments that we have to understand how to optimize, not just from a workforce, but just how do we understand it in a made-to-order environment? We can't just shift assembly lines and shift machines over to now. Well, because this order came in, now we make a shift, and it's inefficient to be shifting that much, right? But how do we still have some forecast visibility to what we think the very near term is going to be, and make sure that from a sourcing and procurement standpoint that we can meet those needs in a more dynamic way, in a more near real time fashion, because whenever we ship those orders, it may be that we used to rely on, here's our weekly demand schedule. And so we produce a weekly demand, and then we'd share that a couple of weeks in advance for what we think our weekly demand is going to be with our suppliers. And then we hope that they can fulfill that demand. And now we have seen shifts to where we're getting more near real time and having better data integrations back and forth with these suppliers to where they can meet that more flexible demand. But I think from a data play, everything starts with a more accurate demand signal.
Absolutely.
And what we've seen is that the ways that we used to do forecasting no longer apply to the same extent. For instance, it may be that we had certain seasonality in our demand signal and with various products that were seasonal based, and we'd rely on our historical seasonality to determine what our demand should be for this year. Well, if we look back at last year with all the supply constraints that we had, we might get a false demand signal. And so we're putting too much weight on that demand signal relative to what has happened more recently in the past 12 weeks, where we always took that into account and what was happening there, but we didn't give it as much weight as we may need to be giving it now. And so, but if we have a third-party forecasting system, or we have a manual process where a lot of people are doing our forecast and we have planners doing forecast and spreadsheets, and then you rely on these macros, that it's very difficult for them to shift and understand how to test a new model. Because what most people don't think about in terms of these forecasts is that we have a champion model and a challenger model. The champion model is the existing model of forecasting. The challenger model then will be any variation, because what we find with our manufacturers is they have very good subject matter expertise, where they will say, oh no, our way of forecasting is off. We do it like this, and we rely too much on these things. And now we've gone through a SKU rationalization, or we've gone through these other things that have changed where they're putting too much, they're not accounting for certain histories on some items to carry the demand of other items. And
Right.
so they have great subject matter expertise, but they don't have the technological foundation that will allow them to just change a few lines of code, see what the impact would have been had we had this new model in place for the last year, and then put that into production to where now we're operating off of a new forecasting model, and we've been able to adapt in a matter of hours, not what could take months and months to try to fix from a forecast demand signal. And then we're now, by the time we fix it, the environment and the landscape has changed, and now we need to consider going back to either the old model or a completely new model altogether.
Absolutely. I mean, COVID really shook all of that up, right? You just couldn't take last year's production and add a percentage to it anymore.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
think now even
we
people
have
are
5% higher growth from last year, so we
right,
expect 5% more than we did the same week last year. And let's use that
right.
as a forecast. That's we're not able to. We don't have the luxury of doing that anymore.
Yeah, and I think I've heard you say that a lot of companies are thinking about which of their products or offerings are more recession sensitive as well. So they have to kind of take into account, where the demand is going to fall from that standpoint.
Yes, I mean, obviously, some product lines are more recession proof. Some have greater price sensitivities. We're seeing a lot of price sensitivity analysis, a lot of price elasticity of demand calculations, where companies are seeing the exorbitant costs on the cost side, but they haven't changed their pricing structure, or they know that they need to. So what do? They just take a blanket, well, let's
Right.
10% raise in cost or a 5% raise in cost, and we're passing that to all of our customers. And then we have to try to be in the unfortunate place of telling our customers and communicating that to them. And so we say, hey, we've taken a 10% price increase. Well, in the real world, theoretically, that makes sense. Like, our costs have gone up. Now we're going to pass that along. But in the real world, what we've seen is that certain products and certain product categories are more price sensitive than other product categories, where we're better off taking a 15% increase on some categories and only a 5% in others, because we've reached a point where some are highly sensitive to price and the demand drops because there's high alternatives from a competitive landscape. And then if we don't properly test that out, either from historically looking at where we've taken price increases in the past and understand those sensitivities, or we do pilots. If we don't have that data, then we try to pilot in very specific ways and look and then analyze the results of those pilots before we broaden it out into a broader environment. But it takes a strategic play, and data is at the heart of it for sure.
Absolutely. It's really sounding like our planning and production, all the aspects of our business have to be much more sophisticated than they've been in the past. And, I think everybody can kind of get their head around the idea of pricing is something that you need to be nimble with. We've always had a situation where we may need to adjust our pricing. Therefore, we would never hard code our pricing into our online catalog, right?
We would never do that.
To be something we can swap out depending on the environment. And the demand plan is no different. The production plan is no different. The staffing plan is no different. The carrier commitments are no different. So I think you just apply that concept across your broader operation, and that's where we are.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you touched on all of the pieces there: the demand plan, the production plan, the workforce plan, and QA and optimization. All of these things that unfortunately what we often see is people still in this kind of spreadsheet world, or trying to manage it through an ERP item by item. And you mentioned the hard coding. Yeah, that we still see that a lot today, where now it's very, you have people that are challenged with, how do we go back and make these updates instead of systematically just push them based on the results of analysis that show what that adjustment should be, and off of a list price, for instance, rather than hard coding. This is the price that we're going to put, and here are the pricing groups and the customers that they get applied to, and the product lines that they get applied to. So it's It's a challenging world out there, but if we have the proper data foundation, if we have the ability to analyze and adapt, and then push results back into source systems that can accept those, then we're in a much better place to be adaptive as we go forward.
Yeah, makes sense. Along the lines of the demand forecast, I know in our previous episode with Doug Bulla, we were talking about the tremendous order backlogs that manufacturers have. Many orders that have been sitting out there for even up to a year or more. And, some reporting that they're in such a great position that they have such a huge order backlog. They're got a very strong business heading into recession. And there's some question about whether that demand is still real. And, it sure sounds like data would be a critical piece of teasing that apart.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly a challenging one, because that it may be that they historically have not been in that situation, and so how can we understand what the real demand looks like there, and what has to happen is in near real time, where we have different approaches to how we do analytics. One is supervised learning, and one is unsupervised learning. And supervised learning, from an analytics standpoint, it means that we have those historical use cases that we can rely on and use as a foundation. The unsupervised learning means we're entering new territory, but we have to be learning as we go and applying those analytical use cases and relying on those heavily for the near term rather than historically looking back at the. But it's a different approach to analytics. It's a sophisticated topic to get into in a podcast, certainly, but it relies on us understanding that this is new territory for the company, and how we use that data and what we can learn from it and how we learn from it has to have a slightly different approach to it.
Absolutely. I just have to say, when you say unsupervised learning, I think of my 3 kids and I'm like,
yeah, are they on fall break right now? At the risk of sounding like an old man, I never had a fall break, but
I know,
all
right?
over the country right now are on fall break. Apparently.
What's this fall break? I did a study abroad in Denmark, and they have like a potato holiday. You get to just take. I mean, it's basically a fall break, but they take it a step further. It's about potatoes.
I want a potato break.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we've covered a lot of different use cases in manufacturing where data can help you become more predictive, proactive, flexible. I know there's hundreds of others we could probably go through with customer lifetime value, churn, track and trace, quality, digging deeper there, predictive maintenance, industrial IoT. I think we don't have quite enough time in this episode to go into all of those, but maybe we can sit down and talk about those in detail in a future episode. So I'd love to hear just kind of thinking about how manufacturers can use their data to just become more flexible, more proactive. What does that journey look like in practical terms?
Yes, that's the real question, right? In practical terms, how do we take this mess of data that we have and turn it into something of value that are, and you touched on it at the very beginning, that organizations want to be data driven. Whether it's, I think, was it 25% that you had said that feel like they truly are data driven,
right?
But these other 75% are wanting to become data driven, and in practical terms, how do we do that? I think it starts with having a technical landscape that lends itself to that, which is that understanding where the data of value is across the organization, and what data we need to bring together so that we have visibility into it, and that we have self-service business intelligence that will enable various users from across the organization to not have to create a huge backlog into IT, where they end up not even asking for a request because they know that they're never going to get that request and that it'll never surface to the top of the IT backlog. But it would be nice if I had this number. But we start to enable that self-service business intelligence, where we bring that data together. We give them a platform for which they can pull the information that they need. It already has standardized calculations that have data governance and standardization across the enterprise. And then we've created this modern data platform that becomes extensible in the event that we have an acquisition or another ERP that just all of a sudden gets introduced. And now how do we incorporate the findings from that new system, whether it's a new WMS, a new ERP system, that we have that common data platform that will allow us to just plug that data right in, and we're viewing it in the same way as any other. And that creates that foundation. But then as we begin to embark on all of those more advanced analytics opportunities, such as predictive maintenance, churn, customer lifetime value, excess inventory, supply, understanding demand signals and how all of these things fit together, and supply chain control towers. And we want to do these more advanced things that we have that solid foundation from which we can use and leverage. That doesn't make it a step where we have to do everything in stepwise form. For instance, what we often hear is customers have a very specific use case that they want to do. We want to predict X, or we want to create a supply chain control tower that does this. Okay, well then here's the first step. And then we have to try to convince them to do the data foundational things that had they already had those in place, the return on the investment from the analysis would be a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. Usually we tell people, you do this so that you can do that. And oftentimes people haven't done those foundational pieces to get started down the right path. And then they have to try to pitch a larger effort for a very singular purpose, when in reality, we see the larger effort as being an enterprise-wide, where every business department and entity should be able to leverage it and take advantage of it. And that has tremendous value in and of itself. But then all those specific one-off questions become easy no-brainers from a business case standpoint as to what they should just go do.
Absolutely. I think that's some very practical guidance that our listeners can take away, is think through the broader strategy, get the big picture around your data strategy and the business questions that you want help answering and the flexibility that you need, and then build that broader business case versus kind of picking one particular scenario and trying to create a foundation that will support that. I think it's also interesting. You mentioned the bottleneck in IT, and, a lot of times business won't even ask for things because, we have a labor shortage and IT is backed up. And I've seen stats that, as many as half of manufacturers are looking to use artificial intelligence more, but there's a shortage of internal data scientists. And, many of our customers, they're not resourced to build an entire department of data scientists to kind of get after how best to leverage AI and machine learning as we head into the future. So would just love to hear your thoughts on, how organizations can address those challenges, and how to even get started uncovering the value of their data and where to begin.
Yeah, I think it begins with a solid data strategy. One of the first engagements that we tend to do with our clients is doing what we call a data value assessment, where we'll go in and understand that full footprint, that all of the data that they have, where's the data value, what are the first steps in trying to understand a roadmap, kind of a solution roadmap that says, here's the technological foundations that we need. And then from a phasing standpoint, this is what would make sense from a return on investment that can really start to drive value. And then in what case can you rely on the resources that you have in terms of a people assessment for the work that they can currently be doing, given their existing workloads, and how this shapes what they do on a day-to-day basis, and how much of your current staff can plug into that, versus in what ways do we need certain staff augmentation, where, hey, we don't have a data scientist on staff, and do we even need one, because we really want the answer to this question, and can someone tease that out in 4 to 6 weeks? If we had the proper data foundation, and then we could get the answer to that question, and then move on to the next questions and those sorts of things. Whereas other companies are starting to identify that they want to have a team of analysts, in whatever way, shape, or form that looks like, a team of data science that they can start to plug in. But without the proper data foundation, those data scientists, what they're having to do is essentially come in and then create everything that they need from a data foundation standpoint. And that might be even separate from IT. And so we get a lot of shadow IT going on where, hey, I need this. And so I'm just going to put together this one solution that will give that to me. And that's going to be funded from a different place than this other funding bucket comes from a normal IT budget and those kinds of things. But if we had that solid strategy and foundation, then we'd understand that which we are building now can be leveraged by multiple groups, whether it's an analyst in finance or whether it's a data scientist that's focusing on operations and they come from different budgets and different things, but that we're using the same data and that it's been standardized and it's been governed in the proper way, and that we're relying on the best practices there for rolling that out.
Right. I think that's great to call out both sides of it, the strategy development as well as the data foundation. And the way to get started with the strategy development would be data value assessment. Start asking the question, if I had this information, it would allow me to do this and it would affect my business this way. And potentially having industry experts kind of help you work through the right questions to be asking.
Yeah, that is the central question, isn't it? It's
Yes,
what do you want to
absolutely.
know? What question? What piece of information? Like if you could predict the future, if you could prescribe certain actions that you should take from an operational standpoint, and you had the ability to do that, how would that change the way that you operate? And then what would the benefit be to you? And we use that as a starting point for a lot of our strategic discussions and understanding where the valuable data lies to be able to answer some of those questions.
Right, right. And then on the data platform side, is there an option for customers to kind of get a jump start on their data platform, or is that kind of a custom build?
It can be a custom build. Some have embarked on this path, but what we found is that many of our clients view reporting as if they go after specific reports. The business has this need, so they build a foundation to support that one need. And what we have been fortunate enough to do is take a higher level step back that says, hey, how do we build something that will allow the entire business to take advantage of it? And instead of building to a specific report, that it becomes extensible in many ways by having additional data sources easily plug into that data model, by allowing advanced analytics and data science. And so we've created this Inspire platform that we've rolled out to our customers that lives in the cloud. It was born in the cloud, and that gets them a little bit of a jump start on some of the reporting right off of Dynamics that we know that our clients need, those that are on Dynamics 365. And then it gives them the ability and the extensibility to augment that and to customize that to their needs while we continue to push out new releases of new modules and new reports and new information that they get, new insights that as we develop that kind of in concert, really, because we're doing it for all of our customers as a product offering, but then we're also pushing that out and allowing them to build on top of it and to customize it to meet their needs. So they're doing their development while we're doing our development, and understanding our concurrent roadmaps has been a fun journey.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's kind of the architectural realization of that partnership where you can kind of augment the skills that you need and the industry standard insights that you may be seeking. So it's been a lot of fun hearing how manufacturers are looking at leveraging their data to their strategic advantage with you today, James. I'm sure you have another project or sales call to run off to today, but I think you've made a very clear case to add a healthy dose of science to the art of running your manufacturing business, and given our listeners some very practical tips on how to get started. So I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Melinda. Always a pleasure. And thank you for our listeners for listening in.